For over 60 years now, audiences have been captivated by escapades of the most famous British secret agent ever put to cinema.
Bond.
James Bond.
As you remember from my Quantum of Solace video, you did watch that, didn't you? I am a major James Bond fan. I won't bore you with how much of one I am, but all I will say is that anytime anything James Bond is announced, I dive headfirst into learning more. Fingers crossed for that IO Interactive Bond game. Like most Bond fans, I am eagerly anticipating the 26th official film, and I dream about what it could be. With no apparent update on the future of 007 as of the making of this video, we really don't have an option but to look back at what came before. As requested by my audience during a recent Goldfinger 64 stream, I will be sharing with you my personal top 10 favorite James Bond movies. As opinions are all personal, there are many differing factors as to what makes someone's favorite Bond movie their favorite. Some like the cars, some like the gadgets, some like the women, others like the score. To me, the movie has to be interesting. I like my Bond films to take me on a ride, help me escape from reality, and if I'm smiling at the end of one, whether I've seen it the first or 91st time, then I'm happy. So, with 6 decades, 6 different actors donned the tuxedo, and 25 official movies, here are what I call the best. Now for each entry, I'll give a brief synopsis for each plot, but there will be spoilers ahead. Let's get started with... After Roger Moore's Bond tenure ended with a lukewarm A View to a Kill, it was time for a new Bond, and with that, a new iteration. Timothy Dalton had felt that the movies had gotten a bit silly and far removed from what Ian Fleming made audiences fall in love with to begin with. So we got 1987's The Living Daylights. The plot sees 007 investigate a Russian defector's claims that the head of the KGB, played by film legend John Rhys Davies, has reinstated an old policy of death to spies.
Death to spies, Minister.
After one of Bond's fellow 00s is killed in an infiltrated training session. Bond's suspicions are raised further when the same defector had Bond target a so-called sniper, whom Bond recognizes as the cellist from the concert he met his contact in earlier. Throughout the movie, Bond has to find out what's really going on and who's really behind the scheme. I'm not gonna lie, it's not the plot that puts us in my top 10. In fact, it's probably one of the most convoluted plots in a James Bond movie. It is a bit slow at times too, but the reasons it's on here? Well, for one thing, the action. With a few exceptions, Timothy Dalton did most of his own stunts in the movie to really sell himself as a more dangerous James Bond. Bond hanging onto the speeding car? Dalton. In fact, this entire opening scene is probably the best introduction to a new Bond that we've gotten so far. You've also got a pretty cool car scene, pun intended, with the Aston Martin V8 Vantage. And who could forget the main henchman, Necros, brutally taking on an MI6 safe house to reclaim the defector. And when Bond and Necros finally fight, how about dangling from a cargo plane's hatch, all while a hitting bomb is taken away? This was another stunt done for real. Except Dalton was only there for the close-ups with the rear projection. Let's talk about Timothy Dalton. In his first outing, he definitely portrays a more believable Bond, as he displays the face of a man who lives as if each day could be his last, and with the toll of what he must do for England. I stated earlier as well, but we also got Salah himself, John Rhys Davies as KGB General Pushkin, whom Bond is led to believe is behind the plot. When you get a chance, look up the interrogation scene between him and Dalton. For a scene without much action, the tension almost becomes palpable, as you really believe Bond is ready to pull the trigger, as Pushkin pleads his innocence.
You are professional. You do not kill without reason.
2 of our men are dead. Koskov's named you. Now why should I disobey my orders?
I am in the dark as much as you are.
It's also got one hell of a final film score from longtime Bond composer John Barry, who had been scoring the movies, barring a few he missed, since From Russia with Love in 1963. As the newer Bond came a newer Bond sound, as Barry introduces synthesizers to the classic sound with great effect. The theme song is fantastic as well, as long as you try not to think about Aha's questionable grasp on the English language. As for why this movie is so low, oh boy, where do I begin? I've already listed that the plot is complicated. The main scheme of the movie is that a KGB general named Koskov and a disgraced American arms dealer, Brad Whitaker, trick MI6 into attempting to assassinate current head of KGB, Pushkin, for supposedly reinstating Śmierć Spionom, which is death to spies. With Pushkin out of the way, the two men would be able to freely sell illegal arms to terrorists in the Middle East. I'm not even doing the movie's plot justice. Trying to describe it is like trying to untangle Christmas lights. The two really don't make for memorable Bond villains either. Koskov acts like a bumbling idiot when he's trying to play innocent.
James, I will never forget what you did for me.
And he's just a smug asshole when his plot is revealed.
I'm sorry, James. For you I have great affection. But we've an old saying. Duty has no sweethearts.
We have an old saying too, Yogi. And you're full of it.
We don't even get a satisfying death for him on screen. It's only implied.
Georgi. Put him on the next plane to Moscow.
Oh, thank you, General. Thank you so much. Thank you.
In the diplomatic bag.
As for Whitaker, he's basically a deadly man-child obsessed with war and dictators.
How do you like my personal pantheon of great commanders?
Butchers.
Surgeons. They cut away society's dead flesh.
He made so little of an impact that you'd be surprised that they brought John Doe Baker back to become Bond's new CIA friend in the Brosnan movies, Jack Wade.
Hey, Bond. You do any gardening?
The only memorable villain here is Necros, the main henchman. When your henchman is making a bigger splash than both main villains, that just makes for weak antagonists. I mean, absolutely no disrespect to the actress, Miriam Diabo, but her character, Cara Malovi, is pretty tepid as far as Bond girls go. I get what they were going for, as Cara represents the normal people who were affected by the Cold War shenanigans. But throughout the movie, she either gets in the way, believes everything thrown her way.
You're a friend of his?
We've been through quite a lot together.
And almost gets her and Bond killed for getting distracted.
What happened?
He got the boot.
Yes, I know she's not a pilot, but still. The last negative I'll give this movie is its iteration of Felix Leiter. John Terry gives every line like he's written it from a cue card off camera.
It's a long story, Felix, but in the end, Pushkin makes a miraculous recovery.
You mean this is a put-up job?
Remember, Bond and Felix are supposed to be longtime friends in the business, but Terry gives the impression that he's just there for the exposition.
Well, you've got me, James. Whitaker's put together a few samples of high-tech stuff, but he's placed no big orders yet.
Why was he even here in this movie? Despite my gripes, I can still end any viewing of this one with content. And it's still a pretty good time for me.
You didn't think I'd miss this performance, did you?
Yes, get it out now. I'll wait. Yes, this is the Bond movie where 007 does a Tarzan yell. Trains a tiger.
Sit.
And dresses like a clown. Believe me, it makes a lot more sense in context. It's also the one that may be questionable about how it portrays its settings and inhabitants, but if you look past all the goofiness, you'll find a charming, fun, and entertaining romp of a movie that I would argue should have been Roger Moore's final Bond movie. The plot of Octopussy has Bond take over a case from a fallen 00 after his predecessor crashes into a British embassy in East Berlin, dressed as a clown, and dead with a fake Fabergé egg in his hand. Bond ends up caught in a plot involving an insane Soviet general, an exiled Afghan prince, and the smuggler they plan to double-cross, and is coincidentally connected with Bond from a previous mission.
I traced Smythe to Sri Lanka, faced him with the facts, and gave him 24 hours to clear up his affairs before I took him back.
He committed suicide rather than face the disgrace of a court-martial.
What's the connection?
He was my father. I'd hoped fate would bring us together one day.
To avenge him?
No, to thank you for giving him an honorable alternative.
This movie contains a lot of what Roger Moore's Bond movies contain. You got some goofiness, some nice gadget usage, the girls, and of course, equipped with that suggestive Roger Moore eyebrow raise.
Fast.
Having problems keeping it up, Q?
Experimental model.
It also has one of the most intense sequences in the entire Bond franchise. Toward the end of the movie, Bond finds out that the villains have snuck a nuclear warhead into Octopussy Circus on a US airbase in West Germany. Seeing Bond have to fight through a train in some rather unflattering portrayal of German citizens and teenagers, while the film makes you know that not only innocent men and women, but children are endangered, puts me on the edge of my seat each time I watch it. The situation really comes to a head when Bond has found the bomb, but is getting pulled away by security, helplessly screaming warnings.
Let me go, damn it, there's a bomb in there!
Don't worry, Bond defuses the device right before the final second ticks off. Some critics have called this scene silly, and I can see some credence to it. I mean, Bond is all painted up and suited up as a clown here, but Roger Moore really sells it as James Bond very nearly fails to stop the bomb. That is how you do suspense with a satisfying ending. Another highlight to me is the title character, Octopussy herself. She's the head of her own smuggling operation and has an elite team of female operatives. She's shown to be capable, even dropping a mook or two herself. The fact that she's relatively Bond's age, Roger Moore was 54 when this movie came out, she was about 38. Keep in mind that most of Moore's leading ladies were in their 20s. But the fact that they were closer in age and have outstanding chemistry on screen really helps sell this relationship.
Something wrong?
Not really. Just a feeling.
Where to come back to bed?
If I were to ding her for one thing, it's unfortunately how useless she becomes in the final act. To give her credit, she and her ladies are successful in taking out Khan's guards and taking back her palace, but as soon as she has Kamal Khan in her crosshairs, she gets distracted by bells, and BAM! Instant damsel in distress. Yes, I know James Bond is the main hero and should get the honors of the final victory, but all of Octopussy's badassery just kind of fizzles out after this moment. She still is one of the better Bond girls despite this though. As for villains, well, besides another choice on this list, this has to be one of the best team of villains in a Bond movie. The main three are General Orlov, Kamal Khan, and his head henchman and Jaws ripoff, Gobinda. Let's begin with Orlov, played by Steven Berkoff, who is seemingly having the time of his life playing this part.
This is absolute madness. We know where it will end. NATO will counterattack with nuclear weapons.
Never! The West is decadent and divided. It has no stomach to risk our atomic reprisals.
Orlov's main objective is to expand the USSR's reach into Western Europe, despite his superiors' objections. Berkoff plays the role of the mustache-twirling bad guy without the proper facial hair. Opposite him is Kamal Khan, played by Louis Jourdan, who has interpreted his villain as a sly but smug, disgraced Afghan prince.
You have a nasty habit of surviving.
You know what they say about the fittest?
Gobinda, played by Kabir Bedi, and I'm sorry if I butchered that name, is one of the more successful copies of Jaws. He's tall, strong, and pretty imposing. He and Khan also get one of the funniest henchmen questioning his superior scenes.
He'll kill us all. Go out and get him. Out there? Go. Yes, Excellency.
While the movie has the sillier moments, mostly seen in Roger Moore's tenure as Bond, it's also one of the best sweet distractions for an hour or two.
I wish.
What?
I wish you weren't in such a weakened condition. Oh, James!
Following James Bond's official film debut with 1962's Dr. No, no time was wasted in adapting another Ian Fleming novel, and in 1963, my 8th favorite Bond movie, From Russia with Love, was released. The Bond series as a whole, when you really think about it, not only defined the gentleman spy genre, but it showed different ways to go about it. You've got some silly ones that stretch beyond the realm of possibility. You got some bombastic and action-packed ones like Tomorrow Never Dies, but you've also got ones that reflect the gritty, realistic conflicts of the time. This is more true of the original novel, but From Russia with Love is a straight-up Cold War spy movie. The plot in this one has Spectre hatch a plan to trick Bond and MI6 into thinking that a Russian girl, Tatiana Romanova, has fallen in love with Bond, and to prove her love, she's willing to defect and bring a key technology, the Lecter decoding device, with her to meet with James Bond. Of course, Bond doesn't believe the fallen in love part, but MI6 decide that the Lecter is important enough for Bond to quote-unquote take the bait. What Bond and MI6 are unaware of is what exactly the enemy is up to. The movie sort of acts as a chess match, with both sides constantly and strategically sabotaging the other. What really makes the plot work, however, is that despite a few victories, Bond is at a disadvantage throughout most of the movie's runtime. From the moment he meets with his contact, the game has begun. Despite making some clever moves and fooling the Russians, Bond still finds himself being played by and nearly assassinated by Spectre. Look at his facial expressions when the assassin they hired, Red Grant, has him at his mercy. Bond is out of options. I mean, until he uses Q's briefcase anyway. This movie also has one of the best ally characters in the series. Head of Station T in Istanbul, Kiran Bey, played by Pedro Armendáriz. This affable character is always quick with a joke, and ironically a smoke.
Well, who won?
I had visitors. Limpet mine on the wall outside. Time to catch me at my desk. But by good fortune, I was relaxing on the settee for a few moments. The girl left in hysterics.
Found your technique too violent?
And seems to have connections all throughout Istanbul, those being his sons mostly.
All of my key employees are my sons. Blood is the best security in this business.
Kiram usually has a smile on his face, even when committing some of the darker aspects of Cold War spy work. When Bond and Kiram capture an enemy spy on the train, Bond has Kiram stay with him. So what does Kiram do? He tells the prisoner his life story.
I've had a particularly fascinating life. Would you like to hear about it? Would.
When he's unfortunately killed, we, along with Bond, feel an immense drop in the tone. While it may be true that Rosa Klebb may be the main villain of this movie, let's talk about the one who steals the show, Red Grant. Grant is a remorseless, incredibly tough, and conniving bastard. He's a masochistic assassin who enjoys what he does and doesn't care who he's doing it for. Sure, he's hired by Spectre, but he doesn't care about their motives or the effects of his actions. He knows how to be just as covert as 007, but possibly deadlier. Throughout the movie, he kills many of the Russian agents following Bond, just to make sure that Bond survives until Spectre needs him dead.
I've been your guardian angel.
The only way James Bond gets a chance against him is by exploiting his only weakness, greed. Bond offers Grant 10 gold sovereigns from his briefcase to buy a last smoke, to which Grant allows, except insisting that he opens the briefcase himself. Bond tricks him into activating the stun trap from the case, and the fight is on. Even after this trick though, Bond has one hell of a time trying to take out Grant. It takes a secret knife into Grant's left arm, and the use of his own gadget, a Garrett watch, for Bond to best him. Many henchmen in the following movies would try to copy Red Grant. Hans in You Only Live Twice, Peter Franks in Diamonds Are Forever, Eric Kriegler in For Your Eyes Only, Necros from The Living Daylights, and Stamper in Tomorrow Never Dies. And while I do enjoy some of them, Necros and Stamper to be exact, none of them come close to upstaging the original. As for Connery in this movie, you can see that he's become more comfortable in the role. In Dr. No, Connery plays the part straight, but with his second go-around, his Bond has become more wary, more lethal, and more the womanizer audiences would see him to be.
You're one of the most beautiful girls I've ever seen.
Thank you. But I think my mouth is too big.
No, it's the right size. For me, that is.
It gets to stretch more of what Bond can do. This is really the first time in the series where we get to see how the death of an ally affects Bond. A key component to Bond's character is that while he's a professional who will always see a mission until the end, he tends to allow his sense of vengeance to break through. Of course, never in an out-of-control fashion, but if you take out one of James Bond's friends, Bond will not let you get away with it, and he'll make sure that it's painful and horrific. After Kiram is killed seemingly by the Russian spy he was watching, Bond goes straight after Tatiana and ruthlessly interrogates the poor girl. When he finds out that Grant was responsible, it only fuels his rage against him. Now, why did this movie only rank 8th in my list? Like this movie, I won't be extravagant with my answer. There are times in this film that drag on, and it almost feels like the climactic moment of the film is the Red Grant fight. After Bond bests Grant, we see the pair of main characters get off the train, fight off some more Spectre agents, one of whom tries to run down Bond using a helicopter, and get to Venice to take out the Spectre agent really in charge, Rosa Klebb. We have one more fight where Bond is saved by Tatiana, and then we're finally at the credits. This whole chain of additional sequences adds about half an hour to an already long movie, and although there are thrills here, you really can't help but feel the length. That being said, if you want a straight up classic Cold War thriller with little to no silliness, you really can't go wrong with From Russia with Love.
He was right, you know.
What is it?
I'll show you.
Faces and smile.
This is one of the only Bond movies that I grew to enjoy the more I watched it. It was the first time that the Bond franchise did a complete reboot. The series had always had a history of scaling things back when the movies began to get a little off the rails in terms of believability. Just look at how Bond went from going to space and firing lasers in Moonraker to searching for a critical piece of espionage tech before the Soviets find it in For Your Eyes Only. Unlike that example though, this was a completely clean slate. We had a new James Bond, no Q, no Moneypenny. M was still Judi Dench, but her performance made it clear that this wasn't the same M that led Brosnan's Bond.
And how the hell could Bond be so stupid? I give him 00 status and he celebrates by shooting up an embassy. Is the man deranged? And where the hell is he? In the old days, if an agent did something that embarrassing, he'd have the good sense to defect. Christ, I miss the Cold War.
Gone also were the gadgets, quips, and usual tropes that the Bond movies had. I guess that the backlash from Die Another Day was that severe. The plot of this one consists of newly christened 007, James Bond, must bankrupt Le Chiffre, a private banker to terrorists, by beating him at a high-stakes Texas Hold'em tournament the villain puts on to reclaim his client's money. Bond is joined by British Treasury agent Vesper Lynd as he enters the tournament to defeat Le Chiffre and coerce him into seeking asylum with the British government in exchange for information on his clients. Over time, I've really come to enjoy this one. The frequent viewings over the years help answer those questions for the younger version of me. Why doesn't this Bond have more one-liners? He does!
So as charming as you are, Mr. Bond, I will be keeping my eye on our government's money and off your perfectly formed house.
You noticed.
Why isn't there a Q? This Bond has a high-tech cell phone and relies more on practical gadgets rather than cool-looking gimmicks. Don't get me wrong, I love those. Where's Moneypenny? Not here yet. This movie shows more of a rookie 007 rather than the seasoned operative that audiences were used to seeing. Bond is far more reckless here, with his actions unintentionally drawing attention to MI6. He also demonstrates a sense of arrogance and overconfidence that nearly gets him to fail his mission or get killed. It's not until after he accomplishes his mission that he realizes that his job is to really focus on the bigger picture. You really get a sense of progression from a cocky trigger finger into the cool, calculated professional that's ready to get the job done. Until Quantum of Solace regressed him immediately after, but that's a story for another time. There's also an added bonus for fans of the original material. It took me until I finally read the original Ian Fleming novel that I realized that this was more of a modern yet faithful adaptation of the source material. I won't go over every change, as other more qualified YouTubers have done that already, but I can give a couple of my favorite updates to the original story. Let's look at the attempt on Bond's life at the casino. In the book, one of the goons working for Le Chiffre sneaks behind Bond and aims a pistol concealed in his cane into Bond's back. Bond foils him by pretending to be clumsy and falling into the goon, effectively hiding what was going on to the public. In the movie, Le Chiffre's girlfriend poisons Bond's martini, which Bond very nearly dies from until Vesper saves him by connecting the defibrillator from Bond's car.
I'm sorry. That last hand nearly killed me.
In the book, Le Chiffre wasted his investors' money by investing in brothels in France and having it all go down the tubes when prostitution was made illegal in France in 1949, a good 4 years before the story even takes place. In the movie, Le Chiffre loses his investors' money directly because of James Bond. Le Chiffre decides to bet that a specific airline will fail, but sets up the attack on it with an assassin and a bomb. Bond discovers this plot, and through a brilliant and thrilling sequence, has the assassin's bomb take out the assassin instead, making the villain's bet a major bust. Speaking of Lucifer, I don't think enough praise can be given to Mads Mikkelsen's performance. With every frame that he's on screen, the audience can feel that this guy is bad news. He carries such an arrogance that matches Bond's, but whereas 007 is confident that he'll complete the mission and save the day, Lucifer comes off as if he's gonna win, because he's better than you, and he knows it.
Well then, I have 2 pair and you have a 17.4% chance of making you straight.
All of it serves to show that it's really a front, because when this guy is threatened with death, you see him shrivel and cower.
I'll get the money. Tell them I'll get the money.
But make no mistake, he's still active in setting up useful traps when he needs to. With an outstanding and unforgettable performance here, it's no wonder that Mads Mikkelsen got a ton of work after this role. And as with most of the Bond actors before him, Daniel Craig's star rose from his first turn in the tuxedo. Before he was James Bond, I really only recognized him from Tomb Raider. Being the first Bond actor to show an inexperienced 007 on screen was surely no small task. It's not like he could rely on the original story to guide him, as in the book, Bond is an experienced agent, with the Casino Royale business being yet another job for him. I think that Craig demonstrated everything that we love about Bond, but he was able to add a real sense of character growth and brutality that James Bond can carry out when he needs to. When we finally see him say that iconic line in the movie,
"The name's Bond. James Bond,"
we feel that he earned it, and audiences were excited to see where this new 007 would go in the future. I really could go on gushing about this movie, but I guess I need to justify why it's number 7. Although the movie is absolutely fantastic, it doesn't really feel like a James Bond movie to me. Now, I know that was the entire point of the movie, but it's what made it a grower, not a shower. It also suffers from the extended ending. After Bond is rescued from his torture and Lucifer is dead, the movie's progression seems to slow down as we see Bond and Vesper's romance blossom throughout his recovery in Venice. Even when the action picks up again, I can't help the feeling of this movie's not over yet. I can't complain too much, because it was an even bigger problem in the original book, with several chapters being dedicated to Bond and Vesper's short-lived yet mundane romance. Overlooking those, I consider Casino Royale to be a near-perfect movie, just not a perfect James Bond movie. But hey, it can only go up from here, right? Let's press on with... When I think of essential movies that show who James Bond is, well, I can't give away a lot of them as they're on this list, but the one that defines Roger Moore's James Bond is The Spy Who Loved Me. Let me give you a picture of what was going on at this time, in my own interpretation of course. The Bond franchise was in a bit of a slump. First, the departure of Sean Connery after You Only Live Twice left a major hole in fans' eyes that George Lazenby couldn't fill with his sole movie. Connery's return in Diamonds Are Forever was covered in goofiness, and what twisted the night further was Connery's second departure. Roger Moore came in, but his first 2 Bond movies left audiences confused as to what his Bond was. Live and Let Die had Moore playing Bond with his charm and sense of humor, but with The Man with the Golden Gun, the director had Moore emulate Sean Connery to mixed results.
His eye is on me. Where can I find him?
I don't know.
I said where?
I don't know where. He doesn't tell me everything.
With this movie, it was crucial that Eon Productions knocked it out of the park after the poor reception from Golden Gun. 3 years later, Eon, Christopher Wood, the writer, and Roger Moore brought to what many would cite as the movie to cement James Bond's staying power. The plot here is kicked off by the stealing of both a British and Soviet submarine, each armed with nuclear warheads. MI6 sends Bond to investigate. He runs into a KGB agent, Anya Amasova, who is working on the same case. Both find out that a reclusive tycoon, Karl Stromberg, is behind it. The two must learn to work together despite not only being on opposite sides of the Cold War, but after another dark connection that Bond has with his Soviet counterpart is revealed to her. This movie has almost everything you could ask for in a James Bond movie. Excellent chase sequences with the triumphant ski opening, and the Lotus Esprit driving into the ocean becoming a submarine. Excellent one-liners from Roger Moore.
Where's Peckish? Where's Peckish? Pyramids! What a helpful chap.
All those feathers and he still can't fly.
Let's try reverse. That's backwards.
The first appearance of that iconic Bond villain, Jaws. fantastic theme with Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon, and an epic finale featuring an all-out war between the freed prisoners and the soldiers of Stromberg's La Paz. That's right, on one side is Bond's crew, with American, British, and Russian soldiers against the villain. Now come to think of it, I haven't really talked about the main villain yet, Karl Stromberg. Well, to be honest and a little biased, it's because he never really made that big of an impression on me. Sure, his villainous scheme is brilliant, but he doesn't really make for an intimidating villain. He's more of a sits behind the desk and gives the orders kind of guy. He's also definitely a bad boss, with blowing up people who are no further use to him. I guess you could say he's a lot like Blofeld, and, well, fun fact, it was actually supposed to be Blofeld, but at the time, legal issues prevented this from happening. I guess you could say that he's more of the Wish.com Blofeld. Once again, I've got nothing against the actor, Carl Jurgens, but the character just didn't make that big of a splash for me. This movie also demonstrates one of the best examples of the effects of Bond's dangerous life on himself and others. You see, one of the guys that Bond kills in the opening was Anya's lover. If you haven't already, I recommend looking up this scene for yourself. Of course, Anya ends up falling for Bond at the end, but damn, man. The way that Roger Moore portrays Bond's regret for what he must do in the line of duty hits hard. Speaking of Anya, she's the first Bond girl to be in an equal line as Bond, as a fellow secret agent. There's a lot of fun moments in this movie where the pair are constantly trading barbs and one-upping each other. The only moment where she falls a bit short is at the end where, once again, another badass Bond girl becomes a helpless damsel. In her case, like Octopussy, it sort of lets all the wind out of her toughness when this kind of thing happens, but once again, it's a Bond movie, so it'd be kind of a letdown if Bond wasn't the hero of the movie. The only real complaint I've got against the movie is that it sort of drags in the middle. Other than that, there's nothing about it that I'd change. As I stated earlier, The Spy Who Loved Me really showcases the best of Roger Moore's Bond tenure, and would be the template that his following movies would try to emulate, if not outright call back to, and for good reason.
Bond, what do you think you're doing?
Keeping the British end up, sir.
Nobody does it better.
And this concludes the first half of this list. Look at the video progress bar. I think I've held you guys here long enough. I was hoping this would be a short video, but I think my wife is correct in saying that short videos just aren't in my wheelhouse. So if the second part is out by the time you're watching this, feel free to hop over to that one after this one. But if not, think of this as a little intermission. So if you're curious to what my top 5 favorite James Bond movies are, make sure that you're subscribed and have the notifications on. YouTube has been a bit screwy lately about letting you guys know when I upload something, so if you'd like to be sure about any activity on this channel, make sure that bell is activated. I can't wait to share my top 5 with you, but until then, I'm Ginger Wolf, you're awesome, see you then.
This is Solid Snake. Thank you for watching Ginger Wolf's video. Ginger Wolf, huh? Huh. Sounds like one of Liquid's men. Liquid! Anyway, if you liked what you saw, hit the like and subscribe buttons, or I'm gonna have to use some CQC on you. And I don't think either of us want that. Snake out.